Welcome back to another episode of Worldbuilding Praxis, where we are building a fantasy world from scratch for use as a D&D campaign setting. In the previous episode, we created our Pantheon as well as our planar system. And in this episode, we're going to build our planet. Specifically, the continent on which our adventures will take place. Before we get to planet building, we're going to talk about magic level and weirdness level. In the D&D milieu, high versus low magic simply refers to how prevalent magic is in your campaign setting. And, because this tends to be how people work, how common it is usually informs how understood it is, which in turn informs how acceptable it is. Weirdness, on the other hand, refers to how different the normal of your setting is compared to that of our mundane world. This could mean anything from the silliness of Discworld to the gravity of cosmic horror. The reason we're talking about this at such an early stage of the world building process is that one of the largest influences on the weirdness level of your campaign setting is the physical planet, or other substrate, atop which your adventures take place. This could mean fantastical stuff, like deciding your entire campaign setting is contained within an Empyrean's backpack. Or more sci-fi stuff, like your planet is more or less massive than Earth, it doesn't have a moon, or it has 3 suns. All of these things would constitute a moderate to high weirdness level. It should be said, if your setting has a high weirdness level, it does not necessarily have a high magic level. Though these things do often go hand in hand. I think the reasoning is, the more your world diverges from our laws of physics, the more magic you will need to fill in the gaps. Nevertheless, you can run a high magic campaign in a scientifically consistent world with a topography a geosciences professor would be proud of. Or you can run a low magic campaign set on a disk planet supported by the shoulders of 4 elephants all riding on a giant turtle. This stuff isn't really set in stone. You've got a decent amount of wiggle room when it comes to running adventures with differing magic and weirdness levels all within the same campaign setting. But we'll get to that in step 3. Because we're going to keep things simple in this series, and because it's sort of what's expected in baseline D&D, we are going to build Praxis as a medium magic, low weirdness setting. So magic is a known quantity, but not that many people can use it. And our planet will be an Earth analog. Same size, same composition, 1 moon and 1 sun. The amount of consideration you give to the geology of your planet is entirely up to you. I've gone pretty in depth with this stuff in the past, but that's mostly because I find geoscience interesting. If that sounds like your cup of tea and you want to spend a couple of weeks studying and developing a geological history of your world, go for it. When I did this, I used How to Build a Habitable Planet by Wallace S. Brooker, as well as Earth as an Evolving Planetary System by Kent C. Condy. This one was recommended to me by the online world building community, and I think the other one was too, but I can't quite remember. Also, I'm pretty sure Earth as an Evolving Planetary System assumes you have taken Geology 101, so to help me with some concepts and terminology, I picked up a rather dated Geology 101 textbook from a used bookstore for like $10. There was also an online world building guide which really helped me, but I couldn't find the exact one I used when I was learning all of this stuff. While looking for it on the world building subreddit, I came across the World Building Pasta blog, which is pretty awesome. I definitely use it as a refresher a few times while making this video, so give it a look. We're going to build Praxis using the same rudimentary processes that made Earth, while keeping things pretty simple. There are a million caveats I could give before we get into continent building, so I'll try and roll them all into one big one. This stuff is complicated, I don't have a degree in it, and our understanding of a lot of these processes is still evolving as science moves forward. To keep things simple and low in weirdness, Praxis is going to be roughly the same size, chemical makeup, and age as Earth. We're going to be concentrating on the Phanerozoic crust, which, in layman's terms, just means we're not going to worry about anything too early in our planet's geologic history, nor anything too far below its surface. The order in which we are going to complete the next few steps is going to roughly correlate with the flow of cause and effect on Earth, which means we must start with plate tectonics. Plate tectonics, as well as the cascading effects it creates, are responsible for how the surface of the Earth looks, along with the sun, the rotation of the planet, and a few other things. When I was in grade school, the tectonic plates were often analogized to a suit of armor that didn't quite fit. An image I found a little more helpful is that of a swimming pool that hasn't been cleaned in a very long time, with a bunch of detritus just floating around in it. I'm talking leaves, acorns, and those little fuzzy strings of seeds which are just everywhere in Texas, which I found out today are called catkins. There is some movement in the water below all of this stuff. Some larger bodies of this flotsam and jetsam have aggregated and are now moving around as a larger whole. Sometimes they run into another of these bunches of stuff, and sometimes one of the floating clusters will break apart. Just like the surface of our very dirty pool, the surface of the Earth is covered by the crust. Tectonic plates are large congealed masses of crust which are moving relative to each other, the borders between which are defined but not permanent. For the sake of this video, we are going to focus on one quadrosphere, or a half of a hemisphere. In short, from the pole to the equator on the front half of your planet. 1 or 2 continents gives us plenty of room to run adventures, and having 3/4 of our globe remain uncharted gives us plenty of room for the massive oceans which assumedly cover much of your Earth-like planet, as well as some room to expand our campaign setting in the future. Sometime down the line, say 5 or 6 adventures in the future, when things start to feel a little stale, what do you know, a new continent has been discovered on the other side of the planet, leading to an age of exploration. First things first, let's get our plate boundaries drawn. You can just freehand these, but I decided to get a little experimental. This is a picture of some cracks in the road near where I live, and we're going to use them to define Praxis's plate boundaries. Unless your planet is geologically dead, its tectonic plates are moving. As far as the direction of this movement goes, on Earth, this is dictated by a bunch of stuff happening in the inner layers of the planet. Since we're keeping things surface level, we are going to use a DM trick I employ all the time, whether I'm world building, prepping a session, or running the table. Roll a d12 and use clock position. You can use a d8 if you want cardinal and ordinal directions, but I almost never get to roll a d12, so I take every chance I get. Once we have our plates defined, we're going to need some continents. How to build a habitable planet gives us a cool way to visualize the types of Earth's crust. 2 pieces of wood floating in water. One is a much thicker piece of softwood, so it is floating higher in the water, and the other is a thinner piece of dense hardwood, which floats a little lower. And that's what's going on our planet's surface. There are 2 main types of crust. Continental crust, which is our thicker piece of softwood, and oceanic crust, which is our thinner piece of hardwood. Because of gravity and their relative positions, the oceanic crust is where much of the planet's surface water accumulates. So overlaid over our tectonic plates, we are going to define some areas which are those thicker pieces of softwood, which will turn into our continents. Once again, you can just draw some shapes, but I decided to have a little fun with this step too. I poured some water on a rough surfaced table, let it evaporate for a few minutes, and it resulted in some nice, irregular, continenty outlines. Using Earth as an example, some of our continents' edges will often roughly align with plate boundaries. If we were truly designing our planet from the ground up, the position and shape of our continents could be traced back to past tectonic activity. But since we're not charting 2 billion years of tectonic history, give or take, we're just gonna eyeball it. Now is as good a time as any to jot down some latitudes. I like to make sure my larger continents get close to both the equator as well as the 60-degree line. That way we can easily include pretty much any biome or environment. As far as size goes, our continent is going to be about on par with South America, which is one of the mediumer continents. Once we've got our plates' movements charted and our continents situated, we can start defining our boundaries. Each of our boundaries is going to be defined by the relative directions of the plates involved. as well as whether the crust involved is oceanic or continental. As a quick note, the movement of tectonic plates on Earth is a little more complex than each plate moving in a single direction. Some plates are growing in opposite directions, and others are shrinking from all sides. So, if we ever want to take a few liberties at a particular boundary to change our geography a bit, we don't have to worry too much. The first kind of boundary we'll take a look at is where two plates are running into each other. These are called convergent boundaries. Here we see a convergent boundary between oceanic crust and continental crust. The oceanic crust is denser and thinner, so it slips below the continent at what we call a subduction zone. The oceanic plate is pushed deep into the Earth, creating an oceanic trench. But all the rock that is getting subducted doesn't just sit there. Since it is now deeper, where it gets hotter, it gets all melty and starts bubbling up a bit, uplifting the continent above it, creating a mountain range littered with active volcanoes. This is what is currently happening between the South American plate and the Nazca plate to create the Andes mountain range. Let's take a look at this boundary, where two areas of continental crust are converging. When two continental plates collide, the crust is too thick and too buoyant to be subducted, so we get a kind of crumpling accordion effect, resulting in incredibly tall mountains but no volcanoes. This is what is currently happening to create the Himalayas. The Indian plate is colliding with the Eurasian plate. Our final convergent boundary is one between two oceanic plates. Even though both plates are made up of similar stuff, one tends to be a little denser than the other, often due to being older and therefore colder. So our denser oceanic plate is going to subduct under the other, creating an ocean trench. Similar to our first example, the rock that is pushed deeper into the Earth heats up, gets all bubbly, and oozes to the surface, forming a volcanic island arc. Some real-world examples of volcanic arcs would be Japan, as well as Sumatra and Java in Indonesia. If we take a look at the center of our continent, we can see that the plates are moving away from each other. This is what is called a divergent boundary. When this happens to continental crust, we are given a rift valley in the middle with volcanoes surrounding it. This is the current situation in the East African Rift. Since I've done this before and I knew what was coming, I massaged the directions of my boundaries to situate this nice inland sea above a continental rift. When divergence happens in oceanic crust, it results in a mid-ocean ridge. Remember how, in a few of our earlier scenarios, oceanic crust was being subducted? Mid-ocean ridges are where new oceanic crust is created. The plates are pushed apart, magma rises to the surface, and new oceanic crust is created through massive underwater volcanoes. Once a mid-ocean ridge has been around for long enough, it will end up in the center of a giant ocean. If we were to fast forward a few 100 million years, our continent would probably be in at least two pieces, a new ocean having been created between them. The final type of boundary we will take a look at is the transform boundary. These occur in areas where plates meet, but are not moving directly towards or away from each other. They can be sliding past each other, or moving in the same direction, just at different rates. Transform boundaries aren't going to produce the same volcanism or giant mountain ranges that the other boundary types will, but there will still be plenty of earthquakes, like at the San Andreas Fault in California. One thing we should remember is that these processes have been going on for a long time. So there is no shortage of interesting geography located away from active plate boundaries. Take the Appalachian Mountains, for example. A long time ago, an ocean plate slipped under a continental plate. What is currently happening in the Andes Mountains, and right here on our continent, a few more mountain building events and several thousand miles of tectonic drift later, the Appalachians are no longer situated near an active plate boundary, but their geography is still rich and varied. So if we have an idea for a cool geographic feature which doesn't necessarily match up with our tectonics, we shouldn't worry too much. Tectonics probably built it was just a long time ago. I had planned on getting through ocean currents, prevailing winds, and biomes in this video, but People seem to like the shorter format, so we'll end this video here. Next time, in episode 2.2, we'll give our continent some color, filling in its climate as well as its larger patterns of vegetation and animal life, all in preparation for episode 3, where we will design our ancient civilizations. Before I go, just one more quick thing. In response to the previous video, someone brought up a very pertinent question. How am I drawing all this stuff? I am using Photoshop as well as a Wacom tablet and stylus. Off the bat, I understand that 1, Adobe products are crazy expensive, and 2, not everyone has a computer that can run them. I'm mostly using Photoshop because it's easy to record and I'm comfortable with the program. But I'm not going to use any of the crazy blending tools or filters that are available. And I will do everything in my power to make sure everything that we do in the series is easily replicable with paper and pencil. Every tool or shortcut I do use is something I could do by hand, but would just take a little longer. Every DM I know has a different preferred program or method for making maps, of which there are many. So I'll leave it at this. Pen and pencil on paper is what D&D maps looked like for the better part of 4 decades. So do whatever works for you. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for all of the support. I really appreciate it. If you want to continue to support me, you can do all the normal stuff down here, or you can head over to the DMs Guild and pick up a copy of Principles of Shamanism. See ya. Or head over to the DMs Guild and pick up a copy of... I've said it so many times.